Story 1. The Visitor in the Hot Tub. This happened on March 29th, a Saturday night at the tail end of spring break. Mark was a college student in Indiana, living in a house that felt perfect during the day, but ominous at night, thanks to the dense woods that bordered his backyard. He had his 3 closest friends over, Kyle, Keenan, and Derek, for one last blowout before classes started. They spent the evening in the garage, playing pool, drinking, and blasting music, riding that high of good company and bad decisions. Around midnight, Kyle suggested the hot tub. It was freezing outside, so the idea of steaming water sounded perfect. They changed into trunks, grabbed their drinks, and piled in. The steam rose around them, mixing with the cold air, and for a while, it was just laughter and jokes. Then, the mood shifted. From the darkness of the woods, they heard a sound. Snap. It was the distinct crack of dry sticks breaking under weight. It wasn't the light scurrying of a raccoon. It was the heavy, rhythmic crunch of footsteps. The guys went quiet. Keenan tried to brush it off as nothing, and they laughed nervously, turning the music up to drown out the silence. They wanted to believe it was just an animal. 10 minutes later, a figure emerged from the tree line. He stepped into the dim light of the patio. He was a man, around 33 years old, wearing a bizarre outfit, a long black trench coat, white sweatpants, and a gaming headset over his ears. His face was blank, emotionless, and his eyes were blown wide. The guys jumped, yelling at him. "Who are you? What do you want?" The man raised his hands calmly. "I'm Seth," he said. His voice was flat. "I heard you laughing. I wanted to join." Mark told him to leave, but Seth ignored him. Without breaking eye contact, Seth took off his coat, then his shoes, then his pants. He stood there in his underwear for a second, before climbing straight into the hot tub with 4 strangers. The guys were paralyzed with confusion. Mark, sensing how surreal this was, pulled out his phone and started recording. They tried to talk to him. "Where did you come from? Do you know anyone here?" Seth just repeated himself. "I heard you laughing." Then, out of nowhere, he dropped a bombshell. He looked at them and said calmly, "I molested a child." The air left the patio. The guys scrambled out of the water instantly, yelling at him to get out. They physically pulled him from the tub. Seth didn't fight back. He just stood there, dripping wet, staring at them. Then, slowly, he turned and walked back into the woods, vanishing into the dark. The group ran inside and locked every door. They were shaken, laughing nervously to release the tension, but Mark and Kyle felt a pit in their stomachs. It didn't feel over. 15 minutes later, they decided to go back out to lock the hot tub cover. Flashlights in hand, they stepped onto the patio. Mark shined his light on the ground and saw something lying next to the tub. It was a phone. He picked it up. The screen lit up. Mark didn't say what was on the lock screen, but he dropped the phone immediately, terrified. He told the others, "He's coming back." They ran inside. Minutes later, a soft tapping sound came from the window. Tap, tap, tap. Mark knew before he even looked. He pulled back the curtain. Seth was standing right there, on the other side of the glass. He was pressing his face close, wearing a wide, creepy smile. His skin looked pale in the moonlight. He didn't speak. He just stared. Kyle called the police. Mark grabbed a baseball bat and went to the front door, shouting through it.
Leave. Take your phone and go.
Seth didn't answer. He walked slowly around the side of the house. Mark followed him from the inside, moving to the patio door. Seth was there again, staring in. Mark yelled that the cops were coming. Seth didn't run. He just raised his hand slowly, gave a single wave, and walked back into the woods. The police arrived and searched the tree line. They found Seth standing alone in the dark, just watching the house. They arrested him for trespassing. It seemed like the end of the nightmare. But a few days later, Mark saw a Snapchat video from a girl who lived nearby. It showed a different man, not Seth, trying to break into her house that same night. Mark realized with horror that Seth might not have been alone. There were others in those woods, and they might still be out there. Story 2. The Date on the Wall. A few years ago, my two high school friends, Matthew and Tyler, and I, my name is Beck, decided to do something stupid. It was the dead of winter, freezing cold, and boredom had gotten the better of us. There was this massive sewer tunnel at the edge of our neighborhood, running under a small creek right next to a complex of office buildings that were always dark and empty at night. We had driven past it 1,000,000 times, joking about what was inside, but that night, curiosity finally won out. We weren't total idiots, though. We knew we weren't supposed to be there, so we brought snow sleds with us. The plan was that if anyone caught us, we'd just say we were looking for a hill to go sledding. We pulled into the office parking lot, and almost immediately a police cruiser rolled up on us. Someone must have seen us on a security camera. The officer got out and grilled us, asking what we were doing. Tyler, thinking fast, gave him the sledding excuse. The cop eyed us suspiciously, but eventually let us go with a warning to leave. We left, but we didn't go home. We drove around for 30 minutes, waiting for the cop to clear out. Then we circled back, parking behind a building where we couldn't be seen from the street. We hiked down the snowy hill behind the complex. The air was crisp, and we could see our breath puffing out in white clouds. Standing in front of the tunnel, it looked like a gaping black mouth. It was huge, round, and completely pitch black inside. We turned on our flashlights and stepped in. The ground was surprisingly dry, but the air was filled with the sound of dripping water echoing from deep within. The walls were covered in old graffiti, layers of tags from years past. But then, we saw something that stopped us. Spray painted in large, jagged red numbers on the wall was a date. 6/19/19. Unlike the faded graffiti around it, this paint looked fresh. It looked wet. It was recent. That was the first red flag. We felt uneasy, but teenage bravado took over, and we kept walking. The deeper we went, the colder it got. The temperature dropped rapidly. Massive icicles hung from the ceiling like stalactites. Huge, sharp spikes that looked like they could impale you if they fell. "Keep it slow," I whispered. We were scanning the darkness ahead, our weak flashlights barely cutting through the gloom. Suddenly, a sound exploded from the darkness ahead of us. Crack! It was a loud, sharp noise, like something heavy smashing against stone. It wasn't water dripping. It was physical. It came from deep inside the tunnel, too far for our lights to reach. Panic hit us instantly. We scrambled backward, tripping over our own feet, sliding on the concrete, bumping into each other in a frantic rush to get to the moonlight. We burst out of the tunnel and didn't stop until we were halfway up the hill. We stood there, panting, shaking from the adrenaline. I reached into my pocket to check my phone. It was gone. I realized with a sinking feeling that it must have fallen out of my pocket while we were running. I told the guys. Matthew and Tyler begged me to leave it, to just forget it. But I couldn't. My parents would kill me. I have to go back, I said. Reluctantly, they agreed to come with me. We walked back to the tunnel entrance, but the vibe had shifted. It felt heavier this time. The darkness seemed thicker, more oppressive. It felt like we were being watched. We crept back to the spot where we had panicked. I feel like it's over here, I whispered, scanning the ground. Finally, the beam of my flashlight caught the reflection of my screen. Got it, I said, grabbing the phone. We turned to leave, relief washing over us. And then, from the depths of the tunnel behind us, a sound froze our blood. It was a scream. It was loud, human, and terrifying. It echoed off the concrete walls, distorting into a monstrous shriek. And the worst part? It was getting louder. Whatever was screaming was running toward us. We didn't hesitate. We didn't look back. We ran. We sprinted out of that tunnel, scrambled up the hill, threw ourselves into the car, and peeled out of the lot without saying a single word. The drive home was dead silent. We were too terrified to speak. We thought it was over. We thought we had escaped whatever was living in that sewer. But that night, late, when everyone in my house was asleep, my doorbell rang. Ding dong. Then again. Ding dong. It was an obscure hour, way too late for visitors. My dad went downstairs to answer it. When he opened the door, the porch was empty. Maybe it was a prank. Maybe it was a coincidence. But deep down, I wonder if we were followed home from that tunnel. And I wonder who, or what, painted that fresh date on the wall. Story 3. The Shrine of Carts. In April of 2022, I took a construction job far from home. I was broke, desperate for cash, and the offer included a 3-month accommodation package in a remote, rural countryside. Plus, I got to work alongside my longtime friend, Jim. We figured it would be a paid vacation. Hard work during the day, silence and stars at night. I needed the break from the chaos of my life back home. The area was isolated. I'm talking about winding single-lane roads where you can drive for 20 minutes without seeing a single house. While most of the crew spent their weekends drinking their paychecks away, I had different plans. I've always been an outdoorsman, so I saw this as a chance to unplug. On a Friday evening, I packed my gear for a solo camping trip. I found a narrow, unmarked trailhead just 5 minutes from our temporary housing. Within 20 minutes of hiking, the world fell away. It was just the wind, the trees, and the crunch of my boots. I smoked a joint, letting the stress melt off, feeling completely safe in the solitude. Around 7 p.m., with the sun dipping below the tree line, I started looking for a spot to pitch my tent. That's when the smell hit me. It was the distinct scent of burning firewood. At first, I wasn't worried. I assumed it was another camper or maybe a local having a bonfire. But as I crept closer, I saw the faint orange glow flickering through the dense brush. Curious and feeling confident thanks to my background in combat sports, I decided to check it out. I stepped into a clearing, and my confusion instantly turned to dread. It wasn't a campsite. It was a ritual site. Suspended in the air, tied to the high branches of the trees with thick rope, were shopping carts. Dozens of them. They were rusted, mangled, and hung in bizarre, twisted positions, creating a floating jungle gym of steel above my head. It made no sense. We were miles from the nearest store. The effort required to haul these heavy carts out here and hoist them 20 feet into the air was insane. I pulled out my phone to take pictures because I knew no one would believe me. As I moved closer to the fire, I saw the centerpiece. Hanging directly above the flames was a charred, old-fashioned lawn ornament. A duck. And sitting inside the hollowed-out back of the duck was a baby doll. It had been scorched black, its plastic limbs warped and melted from the heat. I stared at it, my chest tightening. The fire was roaring. There were fresh water bottles scattered on the ground. Someone had been here minutes ago. Or worse, they were still here, watching me from the shadows. My gut screamed at me to leave, to run back to the truck, but a stubborn, stupid part of me refused to let some weird trash scare me off. I retreated about 20 minutes back down the trail, putting distance between myself and the carts, and decided to set up camp there. I figured I was far enough away. I built a small fire, cooked a steak and potato dinner in foil, and tried to relax. I smoked another joint to dull the anxiety and put on my headphones, listening to a downloaded playlist of cold case files. The voices recounting unsolved murders were strangely comforting compared to the silence outside. I fell asleep, but it didn't last. I woke up suddenly. The air inside the tent was freezing. The fire outside had died down to embers. I checked my phone. 4 a.m. I lay there in the dark, wondering what woke me. Then I heard it. Whistle. A slow, eerie tune was drifting through the trees. It wasn't a bird. It was a human, whistling a melody, clear and chilling. My body locked up. I couldn't move. I listened as the whistling got closer, and then stopped abruptly. What followed was worse. Crunch, crunch, crunch. Footsteps. They were fast, light, and quiet. They were circling my tent. I couldn't see anything through the canvas, but I could hear the twigs snapping and leaves shifting just feet away from my head. Survival instinct finally snapped me out of my paralysis. I grabbed my boots, threw them on, and burst out of the tent zipper. I scanned the darkness. The footsteps had stopped, but I realized with horror where they had come from. The sounds had been concentrated on the side of the camp facing the trail, the way back to safety. They were blocking my exit. I didn't have a choice. I turned and sprinted deeper into the forest, away from the trail, crashing through low branches and thorns. As I ran, the woods came alive behind me. It wasn't just one person anymore. I heard multiple sets of footsteps crashing through the brush. They weren't in sync. They were scattered, overlapping. There were at least 2 of them, maybe more, and they were hunting me. I ran until my lungs burned and my legs felt like lead. I found a dense cluster of trees and dove into the underbrush, burying myself under a pile of dead leaves and tangled roots. I lay there, face in the dirt, trying to silence my breathing. The footsteps slowed down. They faded into the distance, but I didn't move. I lay there for what felt like hours, terrified that if I lifted my head, I'd see them standing over me. Eventually, the sun began to rise. I army crawled through the forest, moving inch by inch until the trees thinned. When I recognized the trailhead, I broke into a final sprint and didn't stop until I reached my accommodation. I reported it to the police, but they never got back to me. To this day, I'm convinced the people chasing me were the same ones who built that shrine of shopping carts and melted dolls. It felt like a cult, I finished my contract and went home, but I'm different now. I still hear that whistling when I'm alone in the dark. I survived because I ran, but I know that if I had stayed in that tent 5 seconds longer, I would have ended up just like that doll above the fire.